Well, my refutation speech is on the steroid use has a minimal effect on Major League Baseball. My opponent's secondary claims were that the actual effect of steroids is questionable. When steroids were used widely, everyone knew it, so it had in effect become part of the game. And the third was the rampant use of steroids by baseball players is over. My response to the first secondary claim, he mentioned how, according to one of his books, that they said that steroids are questionable and that protein has the same effect as steroids. The truth is that steroids are not questionable at all. Steroids produce increase in lean muscle mass, strength, and ability to train longer and harder. This, in relationship to baseball, makes an athlete train more, build more muscle, and therefore they are able to become power hitters in a short amount of time. A great example is Barry Bonds. He started using steroids in '99, and by the season of 2001, he had a record-breaking home run season with 73, when before he was only averaging around 40. He stated that protein had the same effects of steroids. If this was true, then why is there such a big deal about steroid use? Taking supplements of protein is different from taking steroids. If you just take protein, it just adds it to your body and you have more to burn. With steroids, it speeds up the process of turning protein into muscle, and that's the main difference. My counterclaim to his first claim is all of this just shows that steroids are not questionable and cause some effects on Major League Baseball. His secondary claim, which was when steroids were used widely, everyone knew it, so it had in effect become part of the game. He talked about the Mitchell report and how over a 20-month period they did a study and found out that owners and managers knew that players were taking steroids. However, reading more on this Mitchell report, the main purpose of this report was to stop the illegal use of steroids in the MLB. This was because the Baseball Commission knew that steroids were causing great problems to the league. One of the main concerns was that was making the sport unfair. Players who weren't using it were overpowered by those who were, and it just made the league look bad. The fact that everyone knew that steroids use was going on causes a greater effect on the MLB rather than a minimal one. According to the Mitchell report, steroid use was causing a horrible image for players and the league. It also showed a bad example for the younger high school kids who wanted to play in the MLB. It just made them think it was okay for them to use steroids if the pros did too. My counterclaim for his second claim was the wide use of steroids and the fact that everyone knew about it just causes a great effect on Major League Baseball. My third claim is steroid use among players in the past years has caused permanent damage to the image and credibility to MLB. So even if steroid use came to an end, there will always be the asterisk over the league. My opponent talked about Jose Canseco's book called Juice and how it mentioned many players who were using steroids up to the end of his career, which was up until 1999. After this, the biggest case was in 2003, where a large list of professional players were found to use steroids that season. The rapid use of steroids has slowed down, but it doesn't mean that it's still not present. Even if it were to come to an end, the MLB will always be tainted because of so many steroids used cases.
All right, the structural things are pretty solid. You signpost everything. When you get to the first point, you are challenging the conclusion with a counterclaim about the muscles and how the steroids actually develop that. I think you need some evidence on this point. The only evidence that you have is the example of Barry Bonds, which I think is a pretty good example, but let's face it, if there isn't any significant impact, then why would people be taking steroids? And that it's noticeable, and there's scientific evidence on the impact that steroids have in developing muscle. It shouldn't be that hard for you to find that information. The argument about comparing it to proteins, I thought that was okay. You say that there's a big difference, but again, I do think that you could use a little bit more data on that point. When you get to the second point, basically the advocate's second point was an attempt to minimize the impact of steroids on the game, and I thought you had a couple of good counterclaims here, one on the fairness of the point and another on the image that it creates to the game and the impact that it might have on the kids. I think that that would have been a good argument to develop a little bit more to make it more convincing. You're not really analyzing the argument that the advocate presented on this point, but you're presenting a counterclaim that I think is pretty well developed. The question is, of course, are they mutually exclusive? And the more you can develop your argument here, I think the easier it would be to say that there has, in fact, been some kind of impact. And then on the third point, the same kind of thing. You're basically making a counterclaim, although the support for it seems to be a little bit repetitive. It sort of begs the question, you know, the proof is that it happened, and so it's always going to be there. If there was some way of measuring it, it would be helpful, and you could provide some information on that. I think you need a little bit more direct analysis of the advocate's evidence and reasoning. You've got good counterclaims on the points that you present, the first 2 points especially, that you present arguments on, but there's not much discussion of what arguments the advocate developed in their presentation, and I think you need some more of that. All right, thank you.